They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I learned that lesson in the most painful way imaginable, through blood, tears, and the death of an innocent. My name is Sarah Collins. I live in a Victorian house with peeling blue paint and creaking floorboards in Hartford, Connecticut. A house that holds more secrets than most people accumulate in a lifetime. A house that my ex-husband wanted badly enough to kill for. I remember that Tuesday in October like it was carved into my skin. The sky hung low and gray, threatening rain that never came. I'd been gardening all morning, my hands deep in the cool soil, planting bulbs that would bloom in spring. Buddy, my 8-year-old Labrador, was sprawled in a patch of sunlight nearby, his golden coat catching the light, his chest rising and falling in that peaceful rhythm I'd grown accustomed to over the years. My phone rang just after noon. Tyler's name flashed across the screen. My son rarely called during weekdays. He was supposed to be in class at Blue River Community College. I felt that first twinge of unease as I peeled off my gardening gloves and reached for the phone. "Mom." His voice sounded strange, hollow, in a way I'd never heard before. Then it happened. The words that would set everything in motion, spoken so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Your dog died! That MUTT!" I remember dropping the phone. I remember running across the yard, my knees hitting the ground beside Buddy's still form. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. His body was already cooling beneath my trembling hands. But there was something wrong. Something deeply, fundamentally wrong with this picture. Buddy had been fine that morning. More than fine. He'd chased squirrels, devoured his breakfast with his usual enthusiasm, nudged my hand for extra pets before settling in the sun. Dogs don't just die without warning, not healthy ones. Not my Buddy. I looked closer, my nursing instincts kicking in despite my grief. There was a slight discoloration around his mouth. His gums had a bluish tint that shouldn't have been there, and when I gently pressed his abdomen, I felt an unnatural rigidity. "Someone did this," I whispered to the empty garden. The words hung in the air, a promise and a curse. Tyler arrived 30 minutes later, his face a mask of indifference that didn't quite reach his eyes. Something flickered there when he saw me cradling Buddy's body. Fear? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to identify. "It's just a dog, Mom," he said, standing at the edge of the garden as if afraid to come closer. "You can get another one. Just a dog." The words cut deeper than he could know. Buddy had been my lifeline after the divorce 3 years ago, when James left me for his secretary. Such a cliché it would have been laughable if it hadn't shattered my world. Buddy was the one who stayed by my side through the endless nights of tears and rage. He was the one who growled protectively whenever James came by to collect his things, sensing something in my ex-husband that perhaps I should have seen years earlier. "Help me bury him," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Tyler hesitated, looking at his watch. "I have class in an hour." "Help me bury him," I repeated, not a request this time. We dug the grave at the far end of the garden beneath the old maple tree where Buddy liked to lie in the summer heat. Tyler dug mechanically, his movements efficient but detached. I watched him from the corner of my eye, noting how he kept checking his phone, how he flinched when I wrapped Buddy in his favorite blanket before lowering him into the ground. "Did you see anything unusual when you found him?" I asked as we patted down the earth over the grave. "No," Tyler answered too quickly. He was just lying there, dead. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That night after Tyler left, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine, and Buddy's medical records spread before me. 8 years of perfect health. His last checkup at Riverside Veterinary Clinic just 2 weeks ago had shown a dog in his prime. Dr. Parker had even commented on his excellent condition for a dog his age. I flipped through the pages, stopping at his vaccination records, his heartworm preventatives, the time he cut his paw on broken glass at Meadow Park. Nothing that would explain a sudden death, nothing that would justify Tyler's callous words or strange behavior. Outside, rain finally began to fall, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. I moved to close the curtains and caught a glimpse of headlights pulling away from the curb across the street. A car I recognized, Maxwell Thompson's old Buick. My neighbor had been watching my house. Maxwell, the retired police detective who lived 3 doors down, who walked with a slight limp from a bullet he'd taken 20 years ago. Maxwell, who had looked at me with pity at community meetings after James left, but never with the judgment I saw in others' eyes. What was he doing parked outside my house at nearly midnight? I grabbed my phone and almost called him before stopping myself. If I was right, if someone had deliberately harmed Buddy, then I needed to be careful. I needed to think like the nurse I'd been for 25 years before retirement. Methodical, analytical, evidence-based. I returned to the kitchen and opened my laptop. 3 hours later, I had a list of common poisons that could kill a dog Buddy's size without obvious external symptoms. I had the names of laboratories that would run toxicology screens on tissue samples. I had the beginnings of a plan. At dawn, I did something I never imagined I would do. I returned to Buddy's grave with a small garden spade and a sterile collection kit from my nursing days. The rain had softened the earth, making my grim task easier. I collected the samples I needed, trying not to look at Buddy's beloved face as I worked. "I'm sorry," I whispered, covering him again. "I'll make this right." By noon, the samples were on their way to a private laboratory in New York. I paid extra for expedited processing. Then I drove to the Cozy Corner Cafe, where I knew Maxwell went every day for lunch. I needed an ally, someone with investigative experience, someone who wouldn't think I was just a grieving, paranoid old woman. He was at his usual table by the window, the remains of a sandwich on his plate, a notebook open beside it. He looked up as the bell above the door announced my arrival, and something in his expression told me he'd been expecting me. "Sarah," he said, closing his notebook as I approached. "I was wondering when you'd come find me." I slid into the seat across from him, keeping my voice low. "I think someone poisoned my dog." Maxwell didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me with platitudes about grief and imagination. He simply nodded once and asked, "Who do you think would do such a thing, and why?" "That's what I intend to find out," I replied, feeling the first cold stirrings of the rage that would eventually consume me. "And when I do, they'll wish they'd never touched a hair on his head." His eyes, pale blue and sharper than his age would suggest, studied me for a long moment. "Be careful, Sarah. Revenge has a way of changing people, not always for the better." "I don't want revenge," I lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I want justice." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. I wanted both, and I would have them no matter the cost. What I didn't know then was just how high that cost would be, or how far I would go once I discovered what I already suspected, that Buddy's death was just one thread in a tangled web of betrayal that led straight to my own family's door. The morning after I buried Buddy, I woke up with a sense of purpose that cut through my grief like a surgical blade. The house felt emptier without the click of his nails on the hardwood floors, without his warm body pressed against my legs at night. But I couldn't allow myself to collapse into mourning. Not yet. Not until I knew the truth. I started in my home office, a small room overlooking the garden where Buddy now lay. I pulled out a leather-bound notebook, a gift from my nursing colleagues when I retired 3 years ago, and began methodically listing everything I knew, everything I suspected, and everyone who might have wanted to hurt me through my dog. James Whittaker topped that list. My ex-husband had never hidden his contempt for Buddy, calling him that beast whenever he came to the house. Buddy, in turn, had shown remarkable judgment of character, growling low in his throat whenever James entered a room. During our divorce, James had fought viciously for the house, arguing that he had paid for it, therefore it belonged to him. The judge disagreed, noting that my nursing salary had contributed substantially to our mortgage payments, and awarded me the Victorian home that had been in my family for generations. "He never forgave me for that," I murmured, tapping my pen against the page. But would James really kill a dog over a house? The man I'd been married to for 23 years was cold, calculating, and often cruel, but was he capable of this? My phone buzzed with a text from the laboratory in New York. The preliminary results would be ready by tomorrow afternoon. Not soon enough. I needed to start gathering evidence now. I dressed carefully in a beige cardigan and simple slacks, the kind of outfit that makes people overlook you, that suggests harmlessness and age. At 56, I'd noticed how easily I could become invisible when I wanted to be. Today, I would use that to my advantage. My first stop was Riverside Veterinary Clinic. where Dr. Vanessa Parker had been treating Buddy since he was a puppy. The waiting room buzzed with the usual morning activity. Anxious owners clutching carriers, dogs straining at leashes, the occasional indignant meow from behind plastic doors. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Collins, I'm so sorry about Buddy." Dr. Parker mentioned what happened. Such a shock. I managed a trembling smile, playing the part of the grieving pet owner. Not difficult, given the hollow ache in my chest. "Thank you, Melissa. I was wondering if Dr. Parker has a few minutes? I just have some questions about what might have happened." 15 minutes later, I was seated in Dr. Parker's office, watching her nervous fingers shuffle through Buddy's extensive medical file. At 34, Vanessa Parker was younger than most veterinarians in the area, but her reputation for thoroughness and compassion had drawn me to her practice years ago. "As I told you during his checkup 2 weeks ago, Buddy was in excellent health," she said, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "His blood work was normal, heart and lungs strong. No indications of any underlying conditions." "Then how do you explain his sudden death?" I asked, my voice deliberately breaking on the last word. Dr. Parker's eyes flickered away from mine, focusing on the file before her. "Sometimes these things happen, Mrs. Collins. Cardiac events can occur without warning, even in healthy animals. Could he have ingested something toxic?" Her hands stilled on the papers. "Did you notice any symptoms before his death? Vomiting, excessive drooling, seizures?" "No," I admitted. "He was fine in the morning. By afternoon, he was dead." Dr. Parker frowned, her professional composure slipping. "That is unusual. Most toxins produce noticeable symptoms before death." She hesitated, then added quietly, "There are some compounds that can cause rapid organ failure without obvious external signs. They're not common in household settings." "What kinds of compounds?" I leaned forward, abandoning my grieving facade. She looked uncomfortable. "I really couldn't say without testing. If you're concerned about poisoning, you should contact animal control or the police. I've already sent samples for toxicology," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Something flashed in her eyes. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. "Fear? I see. Well, those results should provide more clarity." She closed Buddy's file with a finality that suggested our conversation was over. As I stood to leave, I asked casually, "Has James Whitaker brought any animals to your clinic recently?" The question caught her off guard. "Your ex-husband?" "No, I don't believe so." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I said, noting the slight tremble in her hands as she rearranged items on her desk. "He mentioned getting a puppy for his new apartment." "I haven't seen Mr. Whitaker professionally," she replied, not meeting my eyes. I left the clinic with more questions than answers, but one certainty: Dr. Parker was hiding something. The question was whether it related to Buddy's death or something else entirely. My next stop was Meadow Park, where I'd taken Buddy for his daily walks. The park sprawled over 15 acres at the edge of Pinewood Estates, with winding paths through wooded areas and open fields where dogs could run off leash. It was mid-morning on a weekday. The park relatively empty except for a few mothers with strollers and elderly couples on their morning constitutionals. I made my way to our usual route, a trail that circled the small lake at the center of the park. Buddy had loved the water, diving in regardless of season or temperature. The memory of him emerging from the lake, shaking droplets everywhere, his mouth open in what could only be described as a doggy grin, made my throat tighten painfully. Near our favorite bench overlooking the water, I noticed a cluster of teenagers huddled together, passing something between them. They scattered as I approached, all except one, a lanky boy with a shock of red hair, whom I recognized as Ryan Mitchell, my son Tyler's new friend from college. "Mrs. Collins," he acknowledged, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Tyler told me about your dog. That's rough." "Thank you, Ryan," I said, studying his face. There was something unsettling about the boy, a coldness behind his casual demeanor. "You haven't seen Tyler today, have you? He's not answering my calls." Ryan shrugged. "He had some business to take care of. Said he'd be busy all day." "Business?" I echoed. "What kind of business?" "Just stuff." Ryan's gaze slid away from mine, focusing on something over my shoulder. "Look, I gotta go. Tell Tyler I'll catch him later." He loped away, joining his friends who had regrouped at the park entrance. I watched them go, making mental notes of their faces. Something wasn't right about that encounter. Tyler had business that kept him too busy to answer his mother's calls the day after his childhood pet died? And what had those kids been passing around? I spent another hour in the park, casually questioning the regular dog walkers about whether they'd noticed anything unusual the previous day. No one had seen Buddy or Tyler in the park, which struck me as odd. If Tyler had found Buddy dead there, as he claimed, someone should have noticed. By early afternoon, I was back at my Victorian home, installing the security cameras I'd purchased on my way back from the park. Maxwell Thompson found me on a step ladder beneath the eaves, running wiring for the camera that would monitor my back garden. "Need a hand with that?" he called from below, his weathered face creased with concern. I descended carefully, wiping dust from my hands. I thought retired detectives were supposed to sleep until noon and then watch daytime television. A smile ghosted across his face. I never got the hang of retirement. Too quiet. He gestured at the camera. "You expecting trouble?" "I'm documenting it when it comes," I corrected him, leading the way into my kitchen. I put on the kettle for tea, a habit from my British mother that had stuck with me through the decades. Maxwell settled at my kitchen table, his large frame making the antique chair look fragile beneath him. At 62, he carried himself with the alert posture of a man used to watching his surroundings. The bullet that had ended his police career had left him with a limp, but had done nothing to dull his mind. "Tell me what you found at the vet's," he said without preamble. I raised an eyebrow. "How did you know I went there?" "Because it's what I would have done. Start with the medical angle, then work outward." He accepted the mug of tea I offered him. "And because I saw your car in their lot when I drove past this morning." I sat across from him, wrapping my hands around my own mug. Dr. Parker was nervous. She mentioned unusual compounds that could kill without obvious symptoms, then backpedaled when I pushed for details. Maxwell nodded slowly. "Professional caution, maybe, or something else." He took a sip of tea. "What's your theory so far?" "I think James is behind this," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "He's always wanted this house. With Buddy gone, there's one less obstacle if he decides to try intimidation tactics again." "That's a leap, Sarah. From a dead dog to home invasion? You didn't see how Buddy reacted to him, like he sensed something dangerous." I stared into my tea. "And there's something off about Tyler, too. He's hiding something." Maxwell's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. "Your son, you think he's involved?" The question hung in the air between us, terrible in its implications. Was I really suspecting my own child of complicity in killing the dog he'd grown up with? The thought made me sick, but I couldn't ignore the inconsistencies in his story, his strange behavior, the coldness in his voice when he'd called. "I don't know," I admitted finally, "but I'm going to find out." That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked and settled around me, sounds that had once been comforting now setting my nerves on edge. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on rest and went to my office to check the security camera feeds. All quiet, nothing but shadows and the occasional nocturnal animal crossing my yard. I opened my laptop and began researching poisons that matched the criteria Dr. Parker had inadvertently suggested: fast-acting, minimal external symptoms, causing organ failure. The list was shorter than I'd expected, and populated primarily with substances not easily available to the general public. Medical professionals, however, would have access to several of them. James wasn't a doctor, but his company, Whitaker Enterprises, had a pharmaceutical division that developed and tested new drugs. Could he have obtained something through his business connections? It wasn't implausible. As dawn broke, I received an email notification from the laboratory. The preliminary toxicology results were complete, earlier than expected. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the attachment. The report confirmed my suspicions. Buddy had died from acute toxicity caused by a synthetic compound related to aconitine, a poison derived from monkshood plants, but modified to act more rapidly and with fewer detectable markers. It was the kind of sophisticated poison that wouldn't be found in a garage or garden shed. This was professional, deliberate. I printed the report and added it to my growing file of evidence. Then I did something I'd been avoiding. I called Tyler. To my surprise, he answered on the second ring. Mom? He sounded tired, his voice rough with sleep. It's not even 7. We need to talk about Buddy, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have the toxicology results. Silence stretched between us, punctuated only by his breathing. Then, what are you talking about? Buddy was poisoned, Tyler, with a very specific, very unusual compound. I paused, letting the information sink in. I need you to tell me exactly how you found him. Another long pause. This is crazy, Mom. You had your dog's body tested for poison? Are you listening to yourself? Answer the question. My grip tightened on the phone. You said you found him at the park, but none of the regular walkers saw either of you there. You said he was just lying there, but you called him that mutt, something you've never called him before. I have to go, Tyler said abruptly. I have class. It's Saturday, I pointed out. No classes at Blue River on weekends. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. My son was lying to me. The question was why, and who was he protecting? I spent the day reviewing the security footage, making notes of everyone who passed by my house, cross-referencing them with my mental catalog of Pinewood Estates residents. Nothing stood out until early evening when a dark sedan with tinted windows drove slowly past my house, then circled back 10 minutes later. I zoomed in on the license plate and ran it through an online database Maxwell had shown me how to access, a gray area legally, but I was beyond caring about such niceties. The car was registered to Whitaker Enterprises. I was still processing this information when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Tyler standing on my porch, shoulders hunched, hands buried in his pockets. He looked younger suddenly, vulnerable in a way that made my heart ache despite my suspicions. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. Ready to tell me the truth? His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. Can I come in? Please? I stepped aside, watching as he entered the house that had been his childhood home. He moved automatically toward the kitchen, then stopped short, as if remembering that Buddy wouldn't be there to greet him with enthusiastic leaps and a wagging tail. I didn't kill him, Tyler said, his back still to me, but I know who did. The confession, when it finally came, was worse than anything I had imagined. As we sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd nursed scraped knees and helped with homework, my son told me a story of manipulation, greed, and a father who had never valued anything but his own interests. Tyler sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, and rain pattered against the windows, a fitting backdrop for the story he was about to tell. Dad's been planning to get the house back ever since the divorce, he began, his voice low and strained. At first it was just talk, complaints about the judge being biased, threats to appeal the decision. But after his new marriage fell apart last year, he became obsessed with it. I watched my son's face carefully, noting the shadows under his eyes, the way his fingers twitched nervously against the ceramic mug. Why this house? He has more than enough money to buy something bigger, newer. Tyler's laugh was hollow. It's not about the house itself, it's about winning, about taking something from you. He finally looked up, meeting my eyes, and about what's underneath it. Underneath? I echoed, confusion momentarily overriding my anger. The land. Tyler leaned forward. Did you know this property sits on what geologists believe might be a significant lithium deposit? Dad's company has been quietly buying up parcels all around Pinewood Estates for the past year. Your house, our old house, is the last piece he needs. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Lithium, the element essential for batteries, for the green energy revolution everyone was talking about. If there was a substantial deposit beneath this neighborhood, the mining rights would be worth millions, perhaps billions. How do you know this? I asked, struggling to process the implications. Tyler's gaze dropped back to his untouched coffee. He told me, started bringing me into the family business after I graduated high school. Said I needed to learn how real men operated in the real world. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. At first it was just errands, sitting in on meetings, nothing serious. Then he started asking me to do other things. What kinds of things, Tyler? I kept my voice gentle, though inside rage was building like a gathering storm. Information gathering, he called it. Following people, taking pictures, reporting back on their routines. Most recently, he had me watching you. Shame colored his features. I told myself it was harmless, just business. I told myself I wasn't really doing anything wrong. And Buddy? The name caught in my throat. Was that just business too? Tyler's face crumpled. I swear to God, Mom, I didn't know what he was planning. He asked me to get him a key to the house. Said he wanted to have an appraiser look at it while you were at work. I thought... He ran a shaking hand through his hair. I don't know what I thought. That it was just another power play, another way to mess with you. But you gave him a key, I said flatly. Yes, the admission seemed to physically pain him. Last week, he must have come in while you were volunteering at the community center. Must have... He couldn't finish the sentence. Poisoned my dog, I completed for him. Your dog too once. The dog who slept at the foot of your bed when you had nightmares as a child. Tyler flinched as if I'd struck him. I found out yesterday. He was drunk when I went to his office, bragging about how he'd removed the first obstacle. Said the MUTT would have attacked him if he tried to intimidate you into selling. His voice broke. That's why I called you like that. I was so angry, so disgusted. With him, with myself. I couldn't think straight. And you didn't think to tell me the truth immediately? The coldness in my voice surprised even me. I was afraid, he admitted, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. Afraid of what he might do if he knew I'd betrayed him. Afraid of what you would think of me. Afraid I might go to jail as an accomplice. I studied my son, this young man I thought I knew. There was real remorse in his eyes, real grief. But there was also something else, a weakness, a moral flexibility that reminded me too much of his father. How had I missed this growing in him, this willingness to look the other way when it suited him? Why tell me now? I asked, my tone softer despite myself. Tyler wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a childish gesture that momentarily transported me back to his boyhood. Because he's not stopping with Buddy. The company is finalizing the paperwork for the mineral rights. Once that's done, he plans to force you out one way or another. He has people watching the house, documenting your comings and goings. He hesitated, then added, and he has something on Dr. Parker. That's why she was so nervous when you visited her. He's blackmailing her to falsify medical records if necessary. My mind raced, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. The dark sedan that's been driving past the house? Tyler nodded. Company security. Ex-military guys who don't ask questions. I rose from the table and went to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the rain-slicked street. Sure enough, the same sedan was parked half a block away. Its engine off, but a faint glow from inside, suggesting someone was there, watching. I need proof, Tyler, I said without turning around. Not just your word. Something I can take to the police, to a lawyer. I have some things, he said hesitantly. Emails, meeting notes I wasn't supposed to keep, and... He pulled out his phone, scrolling through it before holding it out to me. This is from his office yesterday. I recorded it without him knowing. I took the phone and pressed play. James's voice filled the kitchen, slightly slurred but unmistakable. The dog was just the beginning. That house is mine one way or another. If Sarah won't sell willingly, we'll find another approach. Everyone has their breaking point. A chill ran through me at the casual menace in my ex-husband's tone. This was the man I'd been married to for over 2 decades, the father of my children. Had he always been this person, and I'd simply failed to see it? Or had greed and bitterness corrupted whatever good had once existed in him? Will you help me? I asked Tyler, returning his phone. Will you stand with me against him, whatever it takes? The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I was asking my son to testify against his father, to potentially destroy his relationship with him forever. I was asking him to choose sides in a war he had unwittingly helped to start. Tyler met my gaze, a new resolve hardening his features. Yes, I should have stood with you from the beginning. For the first time since Buddy's death, I felt something like hope. Not a warm, comforting emotion, but a cold, clarifying force that sharpened my thoughts and steadied my hands. We need to be smart about this, I said, returning to the table. Your father has resources we don't. Money, connections, people willing to do his dirty work. We need to gather evidence carefully, build a case that's impossible to dismiss. Tyler nodded, a hint of his father's strategic mind showing in the way he immediately began thinking through the problem. We should start with Dr. Parker. If Dad is blackmailing her, she might be willing to flip if we can offer her protection or a way out. And we need to know exactly what's in those mineral surveys, I added. If we can prove James is pursuing the lithium deposits, it gives him a clear motive that goes beyond petty revenge. We spent the next 3 hours planning, our heads bent together over my laptop, as we created a detailed timeline of events and a list of potential allies and enemies. Maxwell Thompson topped my list of allies. His experience as a detective would be invaluable, and I trusted him implicitly. Around midnight, Tyler left, taking a circuitous route home to avoid being followed by the watchers in the sedan. We'd agreed that he would continue to play the dutiful son for now, gathering what information he could from inside James's operation while I worked external angles. I slept fitfully that night, my dreams haunted by Buddy's trusting eyes and James's cold laughter. When dawn broke, I was already awake, reviewing the security camera footage from overnight. The sedan had remained in position until 3 a.m., then driven away, presumably for a shift change. By 7, I was dressed and heading out the door, my destination the Pine Ridge Cemetery at the edge of town. Not to visit Buddy's grave in my backyard, but to find someone else, someone who might hold another piece of the puzzle I was assembling. The cemetery was peaceful in the early morning light, dew still clinging to the grass between the headstones. I made my way to the eastern section, where newer graves stood in neat rows until I found the one I was looking for. Eleanor Whittaker, Parker beloved daughter and sister, 1982-2021. Truth is the daughter of time. I stood before the grave of Vanessa Parker's younger sister and James Whittaker's former secretary and second wife, the woman he'd left me for, who had herself died under somewhat mysterious circumstances just 18 months after their hasty marriage. Heart failure, the obituaries had said, a congenital condition previously undiagnosed. I hadn't attended the funeral, the wound of betrayal still too fresh, but I'd sent flowers and a card to Vanessa, whom I'd known slightly through Hartford's small medical community. Now, looking at the dates carved into the marble, I wondered if Eleanor's death had been as natural as reported. If James was willing to poison a dog to get what he wanted, what else might he be capable of? The epitaph caught my attention. Truth is the daughter of time, an odd choice for a young woman cut down in her prime, unless it carried some special significance. I made a mental note to research the quote later. I thought I might find you here eventually. I turned to find Vanessa Parker standing a few feet away, a bouquet of white lilies in her hands. In the cemetery's morning quiet, without her professional white coat, she looked younger and more vulnerable, her eyes red-rimmed behind her glasses. "I come every Sunday," she said, moving forward to place the flowers in the metal vase attached to the headstone, though I'm not sure why. It's not like she can appreciate them. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, the words inadequate but sincere. Vanessa straightened, her fingers lingering on the cold marble. "Are you? She took your husband after all. She didn't take anything that wasn't already lost," I replied honestly. "And whatever happened between James and me, or between him and Eleanor, she didn't deserve to die so young." Something shifted in Vanessa's expression, a guardedness giving way to naked grief. "No, she didn't." We stood in silence for a moment, two women connected by loss and by a man who had brought pain to both our lives. "Your dog was poisoned," Vanessa said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "A modified aconitine compound, the same thing that killed Ellie." The confirmation sent a jolt through me, though part of me had already suspected the connection. "You knew when I came to your office." She nodded, not meeting my eyes. The symptoms were identical. By the time I realized what was happening with Ellie, it was too late. The poison metabolizes too quickly to detect in standard talk screens unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "He's threatening to ruin me professionally if I speak out. Says he'll claim I was negligent in her treatment, that I missed obvious signs." "But you have proof?" I asked, hope flaring. "Something that connects him to the poison. Nothing concrete, nothing that would stand up in court." Her eyes, when they finally met mine, held a familiar cold rage. "But I've been gathering my own evidence. Slowly, Carefully. I'm not the only one he's hurt, Mrs. Collins. Sarah, I corrected her automatically. And I think it's time we compared notes, Dr. Parker. Vanessa, she replied with the ghost of a smile. And yes, I think it is. We left the cemetery together, two unlikely allies united by a common enemy. As we walked to our separate cars, Vanessa turned to me suddenly, her expression earnest. Be careful, Sarah. James doesn't just want your house. He wants to erase any obstacle that stands in his way. And right now, you're the biggest obstacle of all. The warning echoed in my mind as I drove to the Cozy Corner Cafe, where Maxwell was waiting with his usual coffee and notebook. I slid into the booth across from him, the weight of everything I'd learned in the past 24 hours pressing down on me. You look like you've seen a ghost, he observed, pushing a cup of tea toward me. He'd already ordered my usual. Not a ghost, I said, wrapping my cold fingers around the warm mug. Just a monster who's been hiding in plain sight all these years. And then I told him everything. Tyler's confession, the lithium deposits, Vanessa Parker's revelation about her sister's death, and the connection to Buddy's poisoning. Throughout my recounting, Maxwell's expression remained impassive, but I could see the detective mind working behind his eyes, connecting pieces, identifying patterns. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, turning his coffee cup slowly between his palms. Finally, he looked up, his pale blue eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. What you're describing is beyond a civil matter, Sarah. This is criminal conspiracy, corporate fraud, possibly murder, going up against someone like James Whittaker with his resources and connections. He shook his head. It won't be easy, and it certainly won't be safe. I know, I said simply. But I can't let him win. Not after Buddy, not after everything he's done. Maxwell studied me for another long moment, then nodded once, decisively. Then we do this right. We build a case so solid that not even his money can make it disappear. He flipped open his notebook, pen poised. Tell me everything again, from the beginning. Every detail, no matter how small. As I began speaking, methodically laying out the timeline of events, I felt something shift inside me. Grief transforming into purpose, fear into determination. James had taken Buddy from me, threatened my home, corrupted my son, and possibly killed an innocent woman. Now he would learn what it meant to awaken the full force of my rage. The monster might have been hiding in plain sight all these years, but he had never faced an adversary who knew his true face. Now he would, and God help him when he did. The next week passed in a blur of calculated moves and counter-moves, like an elaborate chess match where the stakes were measured not in points, but in lives. Maxwell and I established a secure method of communication. Burner phones purchased with cash at different convenience stores across Hartford, switched out every 3 days. We used coded language when speaking, references to nursing procedures that would sound innocuous to anyone listening, but carried specific meanings for us. Tyler continued his performance as the dutiful son, attending meetings at Whittaker Enterprises, laughing at his father's jokes, all while meticulously documenting everything he saw and heard. Each evening, he would send encrypted files to a secure email address Maxwell had set up, building our case piece by careful piece. Vanessa Parker provided medical records, both Eleanor's and Buddy's, with key sections highlighted, showing the striking similarities in their symptoms and blood chemistry. She also gave us names, 3 other individuals who had crossed James professionally and subsequently suffered health crises that resembled poisoning. 2 had survived but with permanent neurological damage. 1 had not. He's getting bolder, Maxwell observed, as we reviewed the files in my kitchen late one night. We'd swept the house for listening devices, another skill from his detective days, and found none, but still kept our voices low. The time between incidents is shortening. He's escalating. I nodded, staring at the timeline we'd created on my laptop. He's feeling pressure from somewhere. The lithium deal must have a deadline. Or he's simply growing accustomed to getting away with it, Maxwell suggested grimly. Power corrupts, and your ex-husband has had a taste of what it feels like to play God. The thought sent a chill through me. James had always been controlling, meticulous about managing his environment and the people in it. But this was different, a fundamental perversion of the man I thought I'd known. Or perhaps, more terrifyingly, it was simply the full flowering of seeds that had been there all along, waiting for the right conditions to grow. "We need access to his office," I said, tapping my finger on a photo Tyler had taken surreptitiously. James's corner office at Whitaker Enterprises, with its imposing mahogany desk and wall of filing cabinets. The geological surveys, the communications with the mining companies, whatever he's using to blackmail Dr. Parker, it would all be there. Maxwell's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Corporate security would be tight. Key cards, cameras, guards. Getting in undetected would be nearly impossible. "Then we don't try to be undetected," I replied, an idea taking shape in my mind. "We walk right in the front door." That night I called Tyler from my burner phone. "I need you to arrange a meeting between your father and me." His sharp intake of breath was audible. "Mom, that's too dangerous. He already suspects something. He's been asking strange questions about you, about what you're doing." "That's exactly why it will work," I explained. "He'll be curious enough to agree. Tell him I want to discuss selling the house. Tell him I'm tired of fighting, that Buddy's death made me realize life is too short for endless conflict." The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but I forced them out. Make him believe it. 2 days later, I stood in the gleaming lobby of Whitaker Enterprises, dressed in a tailored navy suit I hadn't worn since my nursing administration days. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, minimal makeup accentuating the lines of stress and grief around my eyes. Authenticity I didn't need to fake. The receptionist, a young woman with an artificially bright smile, looked up as I approached. "Mrs. Collins, Mr. Whitaker is expecting you. 18th floor, the executive suite." I nodded my thanks, my hand tightening around the leather portfolio I carried. Inside it, not just the property documents I'd claimed to bring, but also a state-of-the-art recording device Maxwell had procured through former police contacts. Connecticut was a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as I was part of the conversation, I could legally record it without James's knowledge. The elevator ride to the 18th floor gave me a moment to center myself, to summon the cold clarity I would need for what was coming. The doors opened onto a hushed corridor of polished marble and glass, the air perfumed with success and money. "Sarah." James stood waiting, a smile that didn't reach his eyes fixed on his face. At 59, he was still handsome in the conventional way that had first attracted me 3 decades ago. Silver threading through his dark hair, his face lined but distinguished, his posture military straight. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "James?" I kept my voice neutral, extending my hand for a businesslike shake rather than the kiss on the cheek he leaned in for. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance at the subtle rejection, but his smile remained fixed. "For you, always time. Please, come into my office." I followed him down the corridor, past glass-walled conference rooms and the workstations of assistants who glanced up curiously as we passed. James's office occupied the corner of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Hartford's skyline and the Connecticut River beyond. "Still the corner office," I observed, taking the visitor's chair he indicated. "Some things never change. Some things shouldn't," he replied smoothly, settling into his ergonomic chair behind the massive desk. "You're looking well, Sarah, considering." The implication hung in the air between us. Considering your dog is dead, considering you're alone, considering you've lost. I let it pass unremarked, opening my portfolio instead. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Buddy died," I began, my voice carefully modulated to suggest emotional fatigue, "about what really matters at this stage of life, about letting go of the past." James leaned forward slightly, interest sharpening his gaze. "That sounds like a healthy perspective." "I think so." I pulled out the property documents, sliding them across the desk toward him. "Which is why I'm considering selling the house." His hand, reaching for the papers, paused almost imperceptibly before continuing. "That's quite a change of heart. You fought tooth and nail for that place during the divorce. It's just a house in the end," I said with a convincing sigh. "Too big for just me now that the kids are grown. Too many memories, good and bad." I looked directly into his eyes. "Too many ghosts." James studied me, searching for the trap, the angle. Finding none obvious, He picked up the documents and began scanning them with practiced efficiency. These are just the original property deeds. No listing agreement, no sale paperwork. I wanted to talk to you first, I explained, leaning back in my chair with calculated casualness. I know you've always loved the house. I thought perhaps we could arrange a private sale, avoid the commissions and the hassle of putting it on the market. His eyebrows rose slightly. Generous of you. What brought on this sudden burst of goodwill? Here was the critical moment, the careful balance between revealing enough to be believable, but not so much as to show my hand. I let my gaze drift to the window, as if gathering my thoughts. I ran into Vanessa Parker at the cemetery last weekend, I said softly, at Eleanor's grave. James went utterly still, only his eyes moving as they fixed on my face. Did you? It made me think about how short life is, how quickly it can all be taken away. I returned my gaze to his, allowing him to see genuine emotion, though not the emotion he thought. Eleanor was so young, and now Buddy. I let my voice catch slightly. It puts things in perspective. Indeed it does, James murmured, studying me with new intensity. Life and death, the ultimate clarifiers of priority. Exactly. I gestured to the documents between us. So, are you interested in the house? I was thinking a fair market value, of course. The neighborhood has appreciated considerably since we bought it. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement, he said smoothly, setting the papers aside. But I'm curious. Why come directly to me? We haven't exactly been on friendly terms since the divorce. I gave him a sad smile. Who else knows the house as well as you do? All its quirks, its history. I paused deliberately. What lies beneath it? The air in the office seemed to vibrate with sudden tension. James's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. And what do you believe lies beneath our old home, Sarah? Potential, I replied simply. Unrealized value. He laughed then, a short, harsh sound without humor. Always the practical nurse, looking for the hidden vein to tap. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. What exactly did Vanessa Parker tell you during your touching graveside encounter? Nothing specific, I lied smoothly, just reminiscing about Eleanor, about how suddenly she was taken. I met his gaze steadily. How similar her symptoms were to Buddy's. A muscle twitched in James's jaw. So subtle most people would have missed it, but I'd been married to him for 23 years. I knew every tell, every micro-expression. Dogs and humans don't share many pathologies, he said dismissively. True, I agreed, unless the cause is external, environmental, deliberate. The word hung between us, charged with accusation. James didn't flinch, didn't blink, his face a mask of polite concern. That sounds like a very serious implication, Sarah. Not at all, I countered, maintaining my facade of weary resignation. Just an observation about the fragility of life, how vulnerable we all are. I gestured vaguely around us. Even the most powerful among us. James studied me for a long moment, calculation evident in his eyes. Then abruptly, he rose and walked to a cabinet behind his desk. I think this conversation calls for a drink. Scotch? You used to enjoy a good single malt, as I recall. Water is fine, I replied, watching as he poured amber liquid into a crystal tumbler for himself. He returned to his desk, drink in hand. You've changed, Sarah. There's a hardness to you now that wasn't there before. Life does that, I said, accepting the glass of water he handed me but not drinking, especially when you lose things you love. Indeed. He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving mine. So, the house. I'd need to have it appraised, of course, and there would be terms to negotiate. I nodded, as if this was simply a business transaction and not a trap I was setting. Of course, I was thinking we could finalize everything within the month. I'm eager to move on. I hesitated, then added, there is one thing, though, that's been bothering me about the timing. Oh, James raised an eyebrow, the picture of casual interest. Buddy's death, I said, watching him carefully. It seems such a strange coincidence that he would die just as I'm considering selling the house, almost as if I let the sentence trail off. An invitation. James swirled the scotch in his glass, the gesture deliberately casual. Almost as if what, Sarah? Almost as if the universe were clearing obstacles from my path. I finished, my voice soft, making it easier to let go. A smile curved his lips, cold and satisfied. The universe works in mysterious ways. Yes, I agreed, holding his gaze. So does aconitine. The name of the poison fell between us like a stone into still water, sending ripples of tension across the room. James's smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed fractionally. An unusual word for a casual conversation, he observed, taking another sip of scotch. Botanical toxicology wasn't your specialty in nursing, as I recall. I've been educating myself, I replied calmly. It's amazing what you can learn when properly motivated. James set his glass down with deliberate care. And what exactly has motivated this particular line of study? Grief creates strange hobbies, I said with a shrug. Some people garden, some join support groups. I leaned forward slightly. I research poisons that leave almost no trace unless you know exactly what you're looking for. The air between us crackled with unspoken threats and counter-threats. James's mask of civility remained intact, but I could see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing options, considering angles. This has been an enlightening conversation, he said finally, standing to indicate our meeting was over. I'll have my people draw up an offer for the house. I rose as well, gathering my portfolio. I look forward to it. As I turned to leave, James called after me, his voice deceptively light. Sarah, give my best to Tyler. He's been such a valuable addition to the company, so much potential. The threat was unmistakable. I turned back slowly, meeting his gaze one last time. I'll tell him. And James, sleep well. I left his office with my head high, my heartbeat thundering in my ears, but my exterior calm preserved. Only when I was safely in the elevator, alone, did I allow myself a shaky exhale, reaching into my portfolio to confirm the recording device was still running. It was capturing not just our conversation, but continuing to record, because the second phase of our plan was already in motion. While James had been focused on me, Maxwell had entered the building using the service entrance, dressed in the uniform of the cleaning company contracted by Whitaker Enterprises. Tyler had provided the schedule, ensuring Maxwell would have access to the executive floor during our meeting. Now, as I departed through the front lobby, Maxwell would be making his way into James's office, using the master key card Tyler had cloned for him. He would have approximately 15 minutes, the length of James's standing Wednesday afternoon, meeting with his executive team, to photograph the documents in the wall safe behind the Japanese print, the combination for which Tyler had observed his father entering on multiple occasions. It was a risk, a terrible risk. If Maxwell were caught, he would face criminal charges. If James suspected our true intentions, the consequences would be far worse than legal. But we needed proof, concrete evidence of the lithium deposits, the corporate conspiracy, and, if we were lucky, something connecting James to the poisons that had killed Eleanor and Buddy. I exited the building into the bright afternoon sunlight, removing my jacket as I walked, the prearranged signal to Tyler, watching from a cafe across the street, that the first phase had gone as planned. Now we could only wait and hope that Maxwell would complete his part without discovery. 3 hours later, in the safety of Maxwell's modest apartment across town, we reviewed what we had gathered. The recording of my conversation with James contained subtle but damning responses to my mention of aconitine. Not an outright confession, but enough to raise serious questions when combined with other evidence. More significantly, Maxwell had successfully photographed dozens of documents from James's safe, geological surveys confirming rich lithium deposits beneath Pinewood Estates, confidential agreements with a Chinese mining conglomerate, and most damning of all, a small leather notebook containing formulations for various toxins, including modified aconitine compounds, with dates and initials next to several entries. E.W. heart failure. One entry read, dated 2 weeks before Eleanor's death. B. cardiac arrest. Another noted, just 3 days before Buddy died. My God, I whispered, staring at the photographs on Maxwell's laptop. He actually kept records. Arrogance, Maxwell said grimly. The downfall of many criminals I've investigated. They want a souvenir of their cleverness, something to gloat over in private. Tyler, who had joined us after ensuring he wasn't followed, looked pale as he scrolled through the images. There are at least 5 other sets of initials here with cardiac events noted. 5 other people. Serial killer, Maxwell stated flatly. That's what we're dealing with. A man who has discovered he has both the means and the stomach for murder, and is refining his technique with each victim. I sat back, letting the full weight of what we had discovered settle over me. James wasn't just a ruthless businessman or an abusive ex-husband. He was a methodical killer who had taken my dog, his own wife, and at least 5 others, and he would continue unless we stopped him. We take this to the police, Tyler said. His young face hardened with resolve. Tonight, Maxwell and I exchanged glances. It's not that simple, I said gently. These photos were obtained illegally. They wouldn't be admissible in court, and your father has connections throughout Hartford, including in the police department, Maxwell added. If we make an accusation without ironclad legally obtained evidence, he'll not only walk free, but be warned that we're onto him. Then what do we do? Tyler demanded, frustration evident in his voice. Wait for him to kill again? Wait for him to come after Mom? I reached out, placing my hand over my son's clenched fist. No, I said firmly. We're not waiting. We're going to set a trap. I turned to Maxwell, determination hardening my resolve. And I'm going to be the bait. Absolutely not, Maxwell said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Using yourself as bait is exactly what he wants. You'd be walking straight into his hands. That's precisely why it will work, I countered, a strange calm settling over me. James believes he's already won. He thinks I'm broken, desperate enough to sell my home, too afraid to challenge him directly. I gestured at the damning photographs on Maxwell's laptop. We have proof of his crimes, but we need to catch him in the act to make it stick legally. Tyler paced the small apartment, conflict evident in every line of his body. There has to be another way. If there is, we don't have time to find it, I replied. Your father is moving quickly. He has a deadline with the mining company, and he's already demonstrated he's willing to kill to meet it. I turned back to Maxwell, meeting his concerned gaze steadily. I know how to do this. I've spent 25 years as a nurse, including 5 in the ICU. I understand medications, dosages, physiological responses better than most doctors. Maxwell studied me for a long moment, then sighed heavily. You're going to do this with or without my help, aren't you? Yes, I admitted, but it would be significantly safer with it. The plan we devised over the next 3 days was both elegant and terrifying in its simplicity. I would invite James to dinner at my home, ostensibly to discuss the details of the house sale in a more comfortable setting. Knowing James's methods, we anticipated he would attempt to poison me during the meal, likely in my drink. Vanessa Parker provided medical-grade activated charcoal and a stomach pump, plus an array of medications to counteract the specific effects of aconitine poisoning. If you ingest even a small amount, you'll have approximately 20 minutes before severe symptoms begin, she warned, her face grave. The antidotes will buy you time, but you'll need to get to a hospital. Maxwell would be monitoring from the guest bedroom, where we installed surveillance equipment borrowed through his old police contacts. Tyler would be nearby in a car, ready to intervene if necessary. The most crucial element, my wine glass would be modified with a nearly invisible reservoir in the stem, collecting samples of anything I appeared to drink while allowing me to avoid actually consuming it. On Saturday evening, exactly 1 week after my meeting in James's office, I prepared my Victorian home for what might be my final dinner in it, or possibly my final dinner ever. I chose a deep burgundy dress that complemented my silver-streaked dark hair, applied makeup with a careful hand, and set the dining table with our old wedding china, a deliberately nostalgic touch designed to lower James's guard. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed on my phone, confirming it was James standing on my porch, a bottle of wine in one hand, a small briefcase in the other. He looked impeccable as always, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Game face, I whispered to myself, then opened the door with a carefully practiced smile. James, right on time, as always. He leaned in, brushing his lips against my cheek in a gesture that once would have been familiar, but now made my skin crawl. Sarah, you look lovely. Thank you. I stepped back, gesturing him inside. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." He followed me into the house, his eyes scanning the entryway, noting the changes I'd made since our divorce. New paint, different artwork, the absence of his presence systematically erased over the years. "I brought wine," he said, offering the bottle. "That Bordeaux you always favored." I accepted it with a nod, examining the label. It was indeed a vintage I had once loved, evidence of how well he remembered my preferences, how calculated his approach would be, how thoughtful. "I'll open it to breathe while we have appetizers." I led him into the living room where I'd arranged a cheese board and olives on the coffee table. "Please, make yourself comfortable. This must feel strange for you being back here." James settled into the armchair that had once been his favorite, placing his briefcase beside it. "Not strange," he corrected, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "Familiar, like returning to something that was always meant to be mine." The possessiveness in his tone sent a chill down my spine, but I maintained my pleasant expression as I took the wine to the kitchen. There, out of his sight, I carefully uncorked it and poured it into a decanter, taking a sample in a small vial that I tucked into my pocket for later testing. I doubted he would poison the wine he brought, too obvious, too easily traced, but caution had become my watchword. When I returned with 2 glasses of mineral water, he was examining a photograph on the mantelpiece. "Tyler and Emma at her college graduation 2 years ago. They've grown into fine adults," he commented, accepting the water. "Despite everything." "They have," I agreed, deliberately ignoring his implied criticism of my parenting. "Emma's considering medical school, you know, following in my footsteps rather than yours." A flash of annoyance crossed his face before he masked it with a smile. "The business world isn't for everyone, though Tyler seems to be adapting well." I sipped my water, watching him over the rim of my glass. "Yes, he mentions how much he's learning from you, about the family business, about how things really work in the real world." James raised an eyebrow. "You make it sound sinister." "Do I?" I smiled apologetically. "That wasn't my intention. I'm grateful you're taking an interest in his future." The conversation continued in this vein, through appetizers and into dinner, a dance of superficial pleasantries, underlaid with subtle barbs and tests from both sides. I served a simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables, dishes I knew James had always enjoyed. Throughout, I was acutely aware of the surveillance equipment recording our every word, of Maxwell watching from the guest room, of the medical supplies hidden in the downstairs bathroom. As I cleared the main course dishes, James leaned back in his chair, surveying the dining room with an air of satisfaction. "It's good to be back here. This house has always had a special energy." "The ghosts of marriages past?" I suggested lightly, returning with the decanter of wine and the specialized glasses. He laughed, the sound almost genuine. "Something like that, or perhaps the sense of what lies beneath." He accepted the wine glass I offered him. "To new beginnings." I raised my glass in response, bringing it to my lips but allowing only the barest amount to touch my tongue before flowing into the hidden reservoir. "New beginnings?" James sipped his wine appreciatively. "Excellent vintage. I'm glad your taste remains impeccable." He set his glass down and opened his briefcase, removing a folder of documents. "I've had my lawyers draw up an offer for the house. I think you'll find it more than generous." I accepted the folder, skimming the contents with practiced casualness. The offer was indeed substantial, well above market value, enough to purchase a luxurious condominium in downtown Hartford and still have plenty left over. "This is unexpected," I said, infusing my voice with genuine surprise. I hadn't anticipated such generosity. James smiled a predator's smile. "I want to make this easy for you, Sarah. Clean, uncomplicated." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a gesture that might have seemed affectionate to an observer, but felt possessive, triumphant. "You deserve peace after everything." "Peace," I echoed, withdrawing my hand casually. "That would be a welcome change." "All you need to do is sign," he continued, removing an elegant fountain pen from his inner pocket. "We can handle the formal closing through my lawyers next week." I studied the contract again, playing for time. "This is moving very quickly. I thought we were just discussing possibilities tonight." "Why wait when we both know what we want?" James refilled my wine glass, his movements smooth and practiced. Drink up. Celebrations are in order. I raised the glass again, going through the motions of drinking while watching him carefully. His attention focused momentarily on my throat as I swallowed, or appeared to, his eyes glittering with an intensity that confirmed my suspicions. The wine, or more specifically my refilled glass, contained whatever compound he had brought to incapacitate me. I should read through this more thoroughly before signing, I said, setting down the glass. Perhaps with my own lawyer present. A flicker of impatience crossed his face. There's nothing hidden in the contract, Sarah. I'm offering you a clean break, a fresh start. He pushed the pen toward me. Take it. I pretended to consider, then smiled apologetically. You're right. I'm being unnecessarily cautious. I picked up the pen, weighing it in my hand. Old habits from nursing, I suppose. Always triple-checking everything. A commendable trait in a healthcare setting, James said smoothly. Less necessary in personal matters between old friends. Are we friends, James? I asked. My tone light, but my eyes holding his. After everything? We're whatever we choose to be, he replied, gesturing towards the contract. The past is just that. Past. I prefer to focus on the future. I nodded, uncapping the pen. A future built on the right foundation. Then, deliberately, I set the pen down and reached for my wine glass again. One last toast before I sign? To foundations and what lies beneath them. Something flickered in James's eyes. Triumph, perhaps, or anticipation. He raised his glass. To foundations. This time, I made a show of drinking deeply, watching his expression shift subtly from anticipation to satisfaction. Setting down my glass, I allowed my hand to tremble slightly, my eyes to lose focus momentarily. Are you feeling all right? James asked, his concern transparently false. You look a bit flushed. Just the wine, I murmured, pressing my fingers to my temple. It's stronger than I remembered. He nodded sympathetically. Perhaps some air would help. Why don't we step out to the garden? The evening is pleasant. The garden, where Buddy was buried, where no surveillance cameras would record what happened next. I nodded weakly, pushing back from the table with exaggerated unsteadiness. That's a good idea. James moved to my side, his arms solicitous around my waist as he guided me toward the French doors leading to the back garden. I leaned against him, playing the role of a woman beginning to succumb to a powerful sedative, while my mind remained crystal clear. The night air was cool against my skin as we stepped onto the stone patio. James guided me to a wrought iron bench, his grip on my arm tightening fractionally. No longer supportive, but controlling, ensuring I couldn't pull away. Sit, he instructed, his voice losing its veneer of concern. The effects will pass more quickly if you're still. I sank onto the bench, allowing my head to loll slightly. What effects? What's happening to me? James remained standing, looking down at me with an expression that chilled my blood. Clinical, detached. The face of a man observing an experiment rather than a person in distress. Just a mild sedative. Nothing harmful. You'll feel confused for a while. Perhaps experience some memory disruption. By morning, you'll remember signing the contract willingly. Nothing more. The wine, I murmured, as if just realizing. You drugged me. Such an accusatory term, he replied, checking his watch. I prefer to think of it as facilitating an inevitable conclusion. I allowed my eyelids to flutter, my breathing to become more labored. Why? The offer was fair. I would have signed. James crouched before me, his face level with mine, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mingled with the scotch on his breath. Because I don't trust you, Sarah. Your sudden willingness to sell after years of obstinance, your convenient visit to Eleanor's grave, your pointed questions about aconitine. He shook his head, a cold smile playing at his lips. You've never been as clever as you think you are. You killed her, I whispered, the accusation barely audible. You killed Eleanor, your own wife. She became a liability, he stated matter-of-factly, just as you have. He reached into his pocket, removing a small glass vial containing clear liquid. This conversation has been illuminating, but I'm afraid we need to move things along. I have an early meeting tomorrow. My heart raced as I recognized what was happening. He wasn't satisfied with merely drugging me. The sedative was just the first step. The vial contained what would be recorded as my cause of death. Cardiac failure, like Eleanor, like Buddy. James, I pleaded, genuine fear entering my voice. Don't do this, please. It won't hurt, he assured me, uncapping the vial. That's the beauty of this particular compound. It mimics a natural heart attack so perfectly that unless someone is specifically looking for it, it's undetectable. He reached for my face, his fingers gripping my jaw with bruising force. Open. I struggled weakly, knowing I needed to maintain the pretense of incapacitation until the last possible moment. Why? The house can't be worth this. It's not about the house, he said, his grip tightening painfully. It's about what's beneath it. Lithium, Sarah. The future of energy storage, of electric vehicles, of technological revolution, worth billions, not millions. His eyes gleamed with avarice. Did you really think I'd let you stand in the way of that? As he attempted to force my mouth open, I made my move, driving my knee upward with all my strength into his groin. James doubled over with a strangled cry, the vial falling from his hand and shattering on the stone patio. I lunged past him, my pretense of drug confusion abandoned. Now! I shouted, the signal for Maxwell and Tyler to move in. But James recovered more quickly than I'd anticipated. With a roar of rage, he tackled me from behind, sending us both crashing onto the garden path. His weight crushed the breath from my lungs as he flipped me onto my back, his hands closing around my throat. You scheming bitch, he snarled, his face contorted with fury. You were playing me. I clawed at his hands, genuine panic rising as my airway constricted. Where were Maxwell and Tyler? What had gone wrong? Through darkening vision, I saw James's expression change from rage to shock. His grip loosened as he slumped forward, revealing Maxwell standing behind him, a garden shovel gripped in his hands. Sorry for the delay, Maxwell said grimly, pulling James's unconscious form off me. He had someone watching the front of the house. Had to deal with that first. I gasped for air, my throat burning as Tyler rushed to my side. Mom, are you okay? Fine, I rasped, allowing him to help me to my feet. Did you get it? All of it? Tyler nodded, holding up his phone. Every word. From the moment he admitted drugging you through his confession about the lithium and Eleanor's murder. He looked down at his father's still form with a mixture of disgust and grief. It's over. But it wasn't quite over. The aftermath unfolded over days and weeks. James arrested and charged with attempted murder. The evidence from our recording, combined with the toxicology samples from my wine glass and the shattered vial contents, providing irrefutable proof of his intentions. The investigation expanded to include Eleanor's death, then the other suspicious fatalities documented in his leather notebook. Whitaker Enterprises collapsed under the weight of scandal and criminal investigation. The lithium mining deal disintegrated. Tyler provided testimony that helped prosecute several of his father's executives who had been complicit in the conspiracy. 4 months after that night in my garden, I sat in a courtroom and watched as James Whitaker was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the murders of Eleanor Parker Whitaker and 3 others. The judge described him as a predator who used his intelligence and resources to prey upon those who trusted him most. As he was led away in handcuffs, James looked directly at me one last time. There was no remorse in his eyes, no acknowledgement of the lives he had destroyed, only cold hatred and something like grudging respect. I held his gaze steadily, refusing to look away until he was gone from the courtroom and from my life. That evening, I returned to my Victorian home, no longer under threat, no longer a battlefield, and walked through its rooms with a sense of both victory and profound sadness. So much had been lost in the process of exposing James's crimes. Innocence, trust, the uncomplicated love between father and son. I made my way to the garden where Buddy lay buried, kneeling beside the small stone marker I'd placed there. We did it, old friend, I whispered, my fingers tracing the carved letters of his name. He can't hurt anyone else now. A soft noise behind me made me turn. Maxwell stood at the garden gate, a small bundle of golden fur cradled in his arms. Thought you might be ready, he said simply, crossing to where I knelt. The puppy in his arms, a Labrador like Buddy, wiggled excitedly, straining towards me with eager curiosity. Tears filled my eyes as Maxwell placed the puppy gently in my arms. I can't replace what you lost," he said quietly. "But sometimes new beginnings are possible, even after the worst endings." As the puppy licked my face enthusiastically, I felt something within me shift and settle. Not healing exactly, but the beginning of it. James had taken Buddy from me, had nearly taken my life, had corrupted what should have been sacred. But he hadn't taken my capacity for justice, for resilience, or ultimately, for love. Maxwell sat beside me on the garden bench, his shoulder warm against mine as darkness fell around us and the puppy explored his new home with boundless enthusiasm. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Some bonds are forged in fire, tempered by shared purpose and mutual respect. What would grow from this beginning, I couldn't yet say. But for the first time since that terrible phone call that had started everything, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow. Justice had been served, not cold as the saying goes, but white-hot and purifying. My revenge was complete, and in its aftermath, something unexpected had emerged. The possibility of a future unshackled from the past, built on a foundation of truth rather than lies. As for James, locked away in a cell with nothing but his brilliant, twisted mind for company, I hoped he thought of me often. I hoped he remembered how the woman he had underestimated, the nurse he had dismissed, the wife he had betrayed, had been the architect of his downfall. And I hoped, with all my heart, that it brought him the same cold comfort that his demise had brought me. It's been 5 years since justice was served in my quiet corner of Hartford, Connecticut. 5 years since I watched James Whittaker, my ex-husband, father of my children and a calculating murderer, led away in handcuffs to serve consecutive life sentences. People often ask if I found peace, if the revenge I orchestrated brought me the closure I sought. The truth is both simpler and more complex than they expect. Revenge doesn't heal the wounds, it simply stops the bleeding. When my son Tyler called me that day with those cruel words about Buddy's death, something fundamentally changed in me. The nurse who had spent decades caring for others, healing pain, preserving life, discovered a capacity for calculated justice that I never knew existed within me. I became the architect of a different kind of healing, the kind that prevents future victims by removing the predator from society. James took more than just my beloved dog that day. He took my sense of safety, my trust in the world, and nearly destroyed my relationship with my son. What he didn't count on was my resilience, my intelligence, or my willingness to transform grief into purpose. He saw me as a simple obstacle to his greed, a middle-aged ex-wife standing between him and the lithium deposits worth billions beneath our family home. He never recognized that the real threat was not my ownership of the house, but my unwillingness to look away from the truth once I glimpsed it. The investigation revealed so much more than we initially suspected. Beyond Eleanor and Buddy, there were 7 other victims spanning nearly 2 decades, business rivals, whistleblowers, even a journalist who had been asking too many questions about Whittaker Enterprises' overseas operations. James had refined his poisoning technique over years, keeping meticulous records of dosages and effects with the clinical detachment of a scientist rather than the remorse of a human being. My testimony at his trial was the turning point, according to the prosecutors. When I described that night in my garden, his confession about the lithium, his attempt to force the lethal compound down my throat, the cold calculation in his eyes as he tried to strangle me, the jury saw not just the evidence of his crimes, but the true nature of the man behind the respectable business facade. Tyler struggled the most in the aftermath. Testifying against your own father, no matter how justified, leaves scars that don't easily heal. He took a year off from college, traveled through Europe, trying to find his footing in a world where everything he thought he knew about his family had been shattered. Emma, my daughter who had been away at graduate school during most of the investigation, became the family's anchor, her steady presence and unflinching support helping both Tyler and me navigate our new reality. Maxwell and I did eventually find our way to each other, though not in the dramatic fashion romance novels might suggest. Our relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect and shared experience rather than passion or convenience. He understood, better than anyone, the complicated emotions that come with bringing someone to justice, the satisfaction mingled with grief, the relief shadowed by lingering trauma. Last year we married in a simple ceremony in my garden, with a 3-year-old Labrador named Charlie serving as our ring bearer. The house, that beautiful Victorian that was worth killing for, I still live in. The mining companies eventually lost interest when further geological surveys showed the lithium deposits were less extensive than initially believed. Sometimes I walk through its rooms at night, remembering everything that happened within these walls, the happy years of raising children, the painful dissolution of my marriage, the deadly game of cat and mouse that culminated in James's arrest. Vanessa Parker and I remain close friends. She relocated her veterinary practice to my neighborhood and has become the go-to care provider for Charlie and the 3 rescue cats we've adopted. The shadow of her sister's murder has lifted somewhat, though on the anniversary of Eleanor's death, we still visit the cemetery together, placing white lilies on her grave and acknowledging how her death, tragic as it was, ultimately led to justice for many others. This story, my story, isn't just about revenge. It's about recognizing evil when it masquerades as ambition. It's about the courage to stand against someone more powerful, more ruthless than yourself. It's about the family we choose and the justice we demand when the systems meant to protect us fail. I share it now with all of you who have followed me to this conclusion, because stories like mine often remain untold. The quiet battles fought by ordinary people against extraordinary evil rarely make headlines or history books, but they matter. They change the course of lives, of communities, of futures. If you've stayed with me through this journey, from that devastating phone call to the final courtroom sentencing, I want to thank you for bearing witness. This channel, Revenge Expected, exists to give voice to these hidden stories of justice served against those who believe their power places them above consequences. If my story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, anger, satisfaction, relief, or even discomfort, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Your subscription ensures that other stories like mine can be told, that other voices can be heard. Hit that like button if you believe, as I do, that no predator should be allowed to operate unchallenged, no matter how powerful or wealthy they may be. The comment section below isn't just a place for your thoughts. It's a community of witnesses, of people who understand that sometimes justice requires us to become the very thing the predators never expect, a force more determined, more patient, and ultimately more powerful than their cruelty. Share your reactions, your questions, your own experiences with seeking justice in an unjust world. I read every comment, and your words matter to me. Creating these videos, researching these stories, and bringing them to you with the depth and detail they deserve requires significant time and resources. If you found value in my story, please consider supporting this channel through Super Thanks, that donation button you see below this video. Your financial support directly funds the production of more daily content, allowing me to continue bringing you true stories of ordinary people who refused to be victims. The costs of running this channel, from research to production to the emotional labor of reliving these experiences, are substantial. Your Super Thanks contributions, whether $5 or $50, make it possible for me to dedicate myself fully to this work. Each donation represents not just financial support, but a statement that these stories matter, that justice matters, no matter how long delayed. Next week, I'll be sharing another story of unexpected revenge, a tale from Boston involving a corporate whistleblower, environmental contamination, and a 20-year quest for accountability. It's a story that will challenge your perception of patience and perseverance in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Until then, remember this: predators count on our silence, our fear, our unwillingness to disturb the comfortable narratives of our lives. Sometimes the most powerful form of resistance is simply refusing to look away, refusing to stay silent, refusing to accept that power equals impunity. This is Sarah Collins, signing off from Revenge Expected. May you never need the lessons I've learned, but should you find yourself facing your own James Whittaker, May you find the strength, the allies, and the determination to seek the justice you deserve.